I wanted to talk a little bit more about Iraq because I hold that one personal. In 2003, when the United States invaded Iraq, I protested the next day and was able, with a group of other individuals, to surround the federal building in San Francisco and effectively shut it down for the day. The following day, I did not, nor did anybody else. The following week, I was upset, but I didn't do anything. I was done with my effort, and 1 million people died. I carry that with me now because, yeah, I protested, and perhaps a lot of people felt like that was their, they did their part. But if we had really done our parts, it wouldn't have happened, or it wouldn't have lasted very long. We should not have accepted that war. I knew, but I didn't know, that there were no weapons of mass destruction. They were pretty obvious the way they were saber rattling and wanting to go to war with Iraq, just like they're doing, or they have been doing, with Iran lately. And I thought at the time that they wanted to take Iraq's oil, and they did, but that wasn't the primary reason. It doesn't seem like now. There's a much bigger picture that's a bit more on the dark side than just taking somebody's oil. And we're seeing it play out in Iraq now. That is that they wanted to create chaos. They wanted to create divisions so that people would fight amongst themselves, so that the military would not have to go do it, go destroy a country. They wanted them to do it themselves. And I think they're pushing for them to do that now. They are trying to get them to start a civil war. As of this morning, 93 people are dead and 2,000 injured. 4,000 injured in Iraq from protests. And this has happened over the course of 2 or 3 days. So the escalation has been astronomical. And I didn't see the protesters being that dangerous, but they shot at them. They had snipers, and they've been open firing on these protesters. Killed 93 of them so far. Injured 4,000. I don't know what the mainstream media is saying about all this, but I know what they're not saying. I'm not sure whether they're saying that these protests are not just about them not liking their government right now, that they're absolutely protesting against the U.S. still being in Iraq, uninvited, when they've already asked us to leave long ago. I watched protesters and I translated some of what they were saying, and absolutely they have a problem with the U.S. being there, which makes more sense than anything. So what are we doing there? Aside from, gearing up to attack Iran from a very convenient position, are we still fighting terrorism? Really? Terrorists, those guys who we pay and we fund, we fund and we arm. And we even gave them speed for a while. I don't know what we still do. We found massive bags of just millions of pills. Went with the arms and the ammo, etc. They were airdropped from the United States for the terrorists. That was a while ago, but still, it's well known that we funded them, and ISIS is us. They're our proxy army in Syria. I'm not saying that there are no terrorists and there are no bad actors there. I'm sure there are, but the primary guys are Al-Qaeda, who are and who always have been the United States friend, including at 9/11. Al-Qaeda, if they had anything to do with 9/11, they were just assisting the U.S. government because they didn't do it themselves. More than anybody, the guys from Project for the New American Century were involved. I don't have proof of that, but the circumstantial evidence is pretty damning. And I won't go into that right now. But look up PNAC, PNAC, Project for the New American Century. And so, Iraq. Now there's pushing for a civil war in Iran and in Venezuela. We're sanctioning them so hard that they're at the brink of starvation. And also that, we're saying, well, they just need to rise up and take out their leader. That's what we're claiming we want from them. That's never worked. That's never worked. Historically, it does not work. So what are they actually doing? They're creating civil war. The exact thing that General Wesley Clark said about what the Project for the New American Century was up to was they wanted to destabilize the entire Middle East. They wanted to destabilize the entire Middle East. They didn't want to take it over. Well, they did. But it's not about conquering or even putting in leaders long term, but destabilizing, making sure that they're never organized enough to probably have their own military. Because if they're destabilized and disorganized enough, then it's a lot easier to control them militarily or just through factions of armies or militias that are doing what? Paying them off to do whatever we want them to do. And we don't have to police these nations if they're turned on each other. We don't have to stand guard and keep our military presence in the country. We stand back from afar and watch them tear each other apart. That's what every country that we've gone into in the Middle East and have left alone now, that's where they're at. That's where Libya is at. That's where Somalia is at. That's where Sudan is at. That's where they're trying to make Iran be. They did a pretty good job of doing that to Syria for quite a while. Syria's kind of starting to recover with Russia's help. But they're not done with us yet because we're still in there with our Al-Qaeda guys claiming that they're going to try and gas their people again, which they never did in the first place. It would have been asinine for them to do in the first place, and they didn't do it. And there's plenty of evidence to show that they didn't do it, and no evidence to show that they did. So they didn't do it. In fact, there's a professor from the United States that studied the trajectory of things that went down there, and his conclusion showed that it was planted, the chlorine gas was planted there. It wasn't dropped from above, it was already there, ready to be hit from somewhere. Probably planted to be hit from the Syrian army when they were bombing. To say, oh look, they used chemical weapons, when they weren't. They were using conventional bombs in war. I'm not saying that that's a good thing, but they did not intend chemical weapons. The trajectory of whatever pierced the containers was not possible from what they explained. And it was a pretty credible study, a very credible study. Anyways, so science and experts really know that they didn't do it. And common sense says they didn't do it because who benefits? Not them. And I reject wholeheartedly the argument that a country's leader is just suicidal and crazy. That's just what somebody says when they have no idea how to blame something on them. Like this, right? Like, oh, why would they do that? Well, because they're just mad. No, they wouldn't do it. That's the point. They wouldn't do it. Because there's nothing for them to gain in doing it. We had told them that if they used chemical weapons, we were going after them. And then suddenly, lo and behold, they're about done with the war. They've almost won the war. And then they use chemical weapons just to invite us in to attack them? Yeah, that's going to happen. It's literally laughable to even think. to try and convince us that that's what happened is really kind of laughable. But, you know, we all too often just buy whatever they say, hook, line, and sinker. And most people still think that the Syrians used chemical weapons on their own people. Because the big lie is something like, if you say it enough times, people will simply start to believe it. Adolf Hitler wrote that in Mein Kampf, I believe. So, you know, it's a Nazi propaganda technique. Just say it over and over again and people will start to believe it. And that's what the news does. Especially now that it's being used for propaganda. So, what are we doing in Iraq? We're starting civil war. We're destroying as much of the Middle East as humanly possible so that we can go after China, using the Middle East as a convenient location and a resources spot. They're just a stepping stool to defeat China, which with all the death and destruction is pathetic and god-awful. So, that's all I got to say about that. Take care.
This country was taken over by a group of people with a policy coup. Wolfowitz and Cheney and Rumsfeld, and you could name a half dozen other collaborators from the Project for a New American Century. They wanted us to destabilize the Middle East, turn it upside down, make it under our control.
Thank you.